Everyone knows General Winter defeated Napoleon.
They're wrong.
The history you were taught. The simplified story of soldiers freezing in the snow. That's not the truth.
By 1811, Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte was not just a man. He was the master of Europe.
He had conquered empires, redrawn maps, and installed his own family on ancient thrones.
He seemed less a general, more a force of nature. A new Alexander, a new Caesar. He commanded the Grande Armée, the largest, most terrifying fighting force the world had ever seen.
More than 500,000 men, drawn from 20 nations. Polish lancers, German infantry, Italian guards, all united by his genius. A living avalanche of steel and cannon.
But one man defied him.
Tsar Alexander I of Russia.
The Tsar had broken Napoleon's continental system, a continent-wide embargo designed to economically strangle his last true enemy, Great Britain.
For Napoleon, this was more than defiance. It was personal betrayal.
Crack the fortress of his empire. An insult to his power.
He assembled his army on the borders of Poland.
His advisors, even his most trusted marshals, begged him to reconsider.
The logistics were a nightmare. The scale was too vast. The land too empty.
He ignored them. Arrogance had set in.
He was Napoleon. He did not follow the rules of war. He invented them.
In the summer of 1812, the invasion began. The Grande Armée crossed the Neman River.
But the Russians refused to fight. They simply retreated. They burned their own fields. They poisoned their own wells. They destroyed their own cities.
A scorched earth strategy. Brutal, total, and terrifyingly effective. It denied the French army everything.
Napoleon's logistical plan, masterpiece built for a 30-day war in fertile Central Europe, shattered within weeks. His supply wagons, struggling on roads that were little more than mud tracks, fell hopelessly behind.
His men were starving.
Discipline collapsed! At Borodino, the Russians finally stood their ground.
It was the single bloodiest day of the entire Napoleonic Wars.
A vortex of artillery and raw, primal carnage.
100,000 men fell in 12 hours. The French won, technically. The Russians simply retreated in good order.
And Napoleon had his prize, Moscow.
He rode into the Kremlin, expecting the keys to the city. Expecting a delegation of nobles.
Expecting the Tsar's surrender.
No one was left to surrender.
And then the fires started. First one, then a dozen, then hundreds. Moscow was burning.
Who lit the fuse? Historians still debate. Was it rogue patriots? Or was it the secret, cynical order of Moscow's own governor, Rostopchin?
It doesn't matter.
Napoleon, the master of war, sat in the Kremlin for 5 weeks and watched the city turn to ash.
He was stunned. He hadn't conquered Russia. He had walked straight into the most elaborate trap in history. He gave the order. Retreat!
And now, winter arrived. The Great Frost began.
But General Winter wasn't the real enemy.
It was just the stage. The real killer was microscopic. It was the other thing that came with the cold. The thing that thrives in filth, misery, and desperation.
It was hiding in the seams of their shrinking, tattered wool uniforms.
As men huddled together for warmth, sharing blankets, sharing body heat.
It spread. Lice. They're everywhere.
And these lice carried the hidden killer.
For centuries, history have given this killer one name: Epidemic Typhus. Rickettsia prowazekii.
It started with a high fever, then violent chills, a crippling headache, spreading rash, then delirium.
It tore through the ranks faster and more silently than any Cossack cavalry charge. Men who had survived the cannons of Borodino simply lay down in the snow and died. But here, history gets strange.
In 2001, a mass grave of 3,269 soldiers was found in Vilnius, Lithuania.
When scientists in 2025 conducted DNA analysis on the teeth of these men, they searched for typhus and didn't find it.
Instead, they found other louse-borne killers: louse-borne relapsing fever and paratyphoid fever.
Does this mean typhus wasn't there? Or that the invisible killer was actually a cocktail of diseases?
The Vilnius grave deepens the mystery.
The army wasn't just freezing, burning their own uniforms. That was the reality of 1812.
Not a glorious battle. It was an extermination by a killer that remains a mystery.
Napoleon, the emperor, abandoned his army and fled back to Paris in a sleigh, disguised. He had invaded Russia with over 500,000 men. Fewer than 30,000 staggered out.
The Grande Armée was gone. His reputation for invincibility was shattered forever. But the disaster in Russia was not the end. It was the beginning of the end.
It was the catalyst.
The god of war could bleed.
For the first time, the subjugated kings of Prussia and Austria saw their chance.
They saw a Napoleon without his army.
They broke their forced alliance with France.
A new, sixth coalition was formed.
The world was uniting against him.
The retreat from Moscow wasn't the final act. It was the event that set the Ashdandi next trap.
The Allies were gathering.
The true battle of nations was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability.
The Battle of Leipzig was waiting.